William Morrow and Harper Audio present The Sisters Hemingway, a Cold River novel by Annie England Noblin. Performed by Madeleine Maby, Eileen Stevens, and Teri Clark Linden.
Prologue. Rachel Hemingway watched the clouds gather overhead as she raced along the gravel path leading her away from her house. It was quiet. Too quiet. Not even the birds were chattering in the trees above her. If she hadn't known better, she would have guessed it was winter instead of a mild spring day. She knew what was coming. Her eldest daughter, Hadley, was safe at her boyfriend's house. At least, that's what Rachel hoped. She hadn't spoken to her since their argument earlier that afternoon. Moments ago, she sent her two younger daughters, Pfeiffer and Martha, to the cellar with the old transistor radio, forbidding them to leave. It was Mary, Rachel's youngest, she'd set off to find. When Mary first turned up missing, Rachel hadn't thought much of it. Mary often disappeared into the woods beyond their farm. Their land bordered part of the Missouri National Forest, and Mary, quiet, dark, and thoughtful, loved the solitude of the thickest parts. At 12 years old, Rachel's youngest daughter was so unlike her sisters. She was a force in her own quiet way, it was true, not unlike the storm that was surely coming to these Ozarks hills. And that was what Rachel loved about her most. She was so like her father, Matthew Hemingway. He'd been different too, not from here. Probably that was what attracted Rachel to him in the first place. It wasn't until Mary hadn't come home, not even for dinner, that Rachel began to worry. It wasn't until she was frying chicken in her mother's cast-iron skillet that she realized Mary must have overheard the argument between herself and Hadley. She'd likely been listening through the vent in her room, as it carried the sounds and smells of the kitchen right up to the second floor. Rachel couldn't be sure exactly what Mary heard, but she knew now that it was probably enough. By the time she pulled on her boots and tied back her hair, the clouds were rolling in, thick and heavy, bringing with them the emotions she'd been carrying around with her all day long, and she knew it was a bad sign. The wind picked up, and Rachel wished she'd brought along a jacket. She was sure Mary had neglected to bring one with her when she left the house that afternoon. Mary never thought of things like that. Necessities such as coats or mittens, or even shoes for that matter. When the rain started, Rachel picked up her pace, running through the forest, calling out for her daughter. Her voice was lost in the wind, and the branches scratched at her bare legs as she ran, but she didn't let up, not even for an instant. If she could get to the white oak tree at the center, the oldest and tallest of all the trees in the forest, she knew she would find Mary. Mary asked her once how old she thought the tree might be, if she had to guess. Rachel had stared up at it, as it was well over 100 feet tall, and not known the answer. "I'm not sure," she said, "but it's very old."
10 years?
Mary asked. She was scarcely 6 at the time, and she must have thought 10 years old sounded quite grown up. "Much older than that," Rachel replied, trying not to laugh. It hurt the little girl's feelings when her mother laughed at her questions.
50 years?
Older?
100 years?
Mary asked, her eyes wide.
Mama, do you think this tree could be 100 years old?
Rachel nodded. "I think this tree may be 100 years old or more," she said. "It's been here a very long time."
Isn't there a way to tell how old the tree is?
Mary asked. "Not without cutting it down," Rachel said. "The only way to tell how old a tree really is to cut it down and count the rings inside."
Rings?
"Around the bark." Rachel made a circling motion with her hand.
"But that will kill the tree,"
Mary stated. "It would," Rachel agreed.
"Maybe I could just ask the tree,"
Mary said, tilting her head to one side the way she often did when she was thinking hard about something. "You could try." Mary let go of her mother's hand and stepped closer to the tree.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?